I didn't know a single piece of paper could feel heavier than a coffin lid. But that bank statement did. It lay across my easel like an accusation, the thin white sheet trembling slightly in the morning breeze slipping through the cracked studio window. The desert was waking up outside, muted oranges bleeding into pale blue, the mountains standing still the way they always had, indifferent to human disappointment. I envied them. The number sat there, bold and undeniable. $31,600 withdrawn, not pending, not processing, gone. At first, I did what old men do best. I doubted myself. Maybe I forgot. Maybe I misread it. Maybe grief had finally loosened its grip on my memory and taken something important with it. So I checked again. Same number, same date, same destination. A luxury event company in Los Angeles. Crystal Peak Events. I laughed under my breath, a soft, broken sound that startled even me. Crystal Peak. I lived in a one-story adobe house 30 miles outside town, painted my canvases alone, cooked for one, and used tea bags until they tasted like warm water. Crystal Peak sounded like a place where people drank champagne that cost more than my monthly groceries. I already knew who did it. 3 years ago, 3 weeks before Margaret died, I added my son Caleb to my bank account. Just in case, he said, hand resting on my shoulder the way it used to when he was a boy. You shouldn't have to think about money while Mom's sick. I remember nodding. I remember feeling grateful. I remember thinking, I did something right. He cares. Margaret passed away in this very room, right there by the window, in the old leather chair that still carried the faint scent of a lavender lotion. Stroke, they said. Sudden, merciful. Nothing about watching the woman you loved for 40 years struggle to breathe felt merciful. Her last words weren't poetic. They were practical. Take care of the kids, Steve. She whispered, they'll always need you. I took that promise seriously. Too seriously, I picked up my phone and stared at Caleb's name until my hand stopped shaking enough to press it. He answered on the third ring. Dad. His voice was rushed, distracted, layered with background noise, laughter, clinking glasses. Hey, what's up? I'm looking at my bank statement, I said. A pause, barely noticeable. There's money missing. Another pause, longer this time. Then he laughed. Oh, that. I closed my eyes. That. Yeah. Don't stress, he said casually. I used it for the engagement party. The words didn't land all at once. They arrived piece by piece, like debris after an explosion. Engagement party. For me and Vanessa. He said, it was last night. Beverly Hills Hotel. Incredible place. Dad, you should have seen it. Last night, the room seemed to tilt slightly, like a painting hung crooked. I wasn't there, I said quietly. Silence. Then a sigh, tired, almost annoyed. Yeah, that was on purpose. I lowered myself into Margaret's chair. My knees felt weak, my chest tight. What do you mean, Dad? It was very upscale, Caleb said, lowering his voice like he was explaining something delicate. Her family, investors, people in her circle. You wouldn't have been comfortable. Comfortable. You wouldn't have fit in, he added quickly. Like a kindness, I was actually trying to spare you. Spare me. I stared at the half-finished painting on my easel, a wash of deep blues and fractured whites. Margaret used to love this one, said it felt like standing in the wind. I paid for that party, I said. Well, technically, yeah, he replied. But you weren't using the money. It was just sitting there. It was my savings, and now it went towards something important. He said, "That's a good thing, Dad. Something important. Not my retirement. Not the years Margaret and I lived modestly so we wouldn't be a burden. Not the quiet life we built piece by piece. His future mattered. I didn't. Caleb," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't even tell me you were engaged." "Well, things moved fast," he replied. "Anyway, I've got to go. Vanessa's parents want to do brunch." "Brunch? Don't worry about the money," he added. "I'll pay you back eventually." The line went dead. I sat there as the desert light shifted from gold to pale white, surrounded by paintings no one in my family had ever asked to see. My own son had thrown a party with my money and decided I didn't belong in the room. $31,600 for a celebration I wasn't invited to. I folded the bank statement carefully, the way Margaret used to fold letters, and placed it back on the easel. That's when it hit me, not all at once, but deep and slow. I hadn't been excluded by accident. I had been edited out, and for the first time since my wife died, something inside me hardened. Not anger, clarity. Tomorrow, things would not continue the way they always had. Tomorrow, I would stop pretending this didn't hurt. Tomorrow, I would find out what remained of me once I stopped being useful. People like to say children don't owe their parents anything. I used to agree with that. I still believe love isn't transactional. I never kept score. I never wanted gratitude carved into stone or praise spoken out loud. I wanted my children to feel safe enough to fail, to know there was always a net beneath them. What I didn't realize was that nets can become hammocks, and hammocks make people forget how to stand. Caleb was 18 when he didn't get into college. He called me from his bedroom, voice shaking, convinced his life was already over. I remember standing in the kitchen, Margaret stirring soup at the stove, listening to him sob like the world had ended. "I can fix this," I told him, and I did. Private tutors, extra test prep, application fees. A loan against the house we were still paying off. Margaret and I didn't argue about it. We never did when it came to the kids. We believed sacrifice was temporary. When Caleb's first business failed, a food truck that never made it past 6 months, I wrote a check and told him it was an education. When Maya called from Chicago at 22, crying because she couldn't make rent after her internship fell through, I sold Margaret's grandmother's bracelet, the one she promised to pass down someday. "She needs it more than I do," Margaret said, and she was right. At least, we thought she was. There was always a reason, always an emergency. Always a bridge we were asked to build so they didn't have to cross the water themselves. Car payments between jobs, security deposits, medical bills. Credit card balances I absorbed quietly, never mentioning them again. 30 years of saying yes, and somewhere along the way, yes stopped meaning love. It started meaning obligation. After Margaret died, the calls changed. They weren't checking in. They weren't asking how I was sleeping, or if the house felt too quiet, or if the paintings still kept me company. They called when something was needed. Money, favors, access. I told myself it was normal. They were busy, building lives. That's what children do. But the space between us kept growing, and I kept filling it with checks and wires and silence. Until the morning after the party, Caleb called early, too early. "Dad," he said brightly, like nothing had happened. "Quick thing, we found this villa in Tuscany for the honeymoon. Incredible views, But we need to put down a deposit today or we lose it. I didn't respond. That, how much? I asked. 15,000, on top of what he'd already taken. I stared at the faded photograph on my desk. Margaret and me on a hiking trail years ago. Sunburned and smiling. Arms around each other like the world couldn't touch us. You took money without asking, I said. And you didn't invite me to your engagement party. He sighed. We talked about this already. No, I said. You explained why I wasn't worth being there. Don't twist it. He snapped. Vanessa's father is a serious art collector. These are refined people. Dad, you live alone in the desert painting abstract stuff nobody buys. Nobody buys. You would have felt out of place. He continued. I was protecting you. Protecting me. I felt something shift in my chest. Not pain this time, but pressure. Like a wall that had been leaning for years finally reached its breaking point. So I embarrass you, I said. You are my father. He replied carefully. But we live in different worlds now. Different worlds. That night, Maya joined the call. You're being selfish, she said flatly. Caleb is trying to start a family, and you're making this about yourself. About myself, I repeated. Yes, she said. You've always resented his success. I almost laughed. Then Caleb said it. The sentence that peeled away whatever doubt I had left. You're basically a wallet with feelings, he said, and you're overreacting. Wallet with feelings. I hung up shortly after. The studio felt colder than usual that night. The paintings watched me like witnesses who had seen everything and said nothing. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a father. I felt like a resource that had reached its limit. And I knew, deep down, that if I said yes again, I would disappear completely. I woke before sunrise, the desert cold against my skin, the silence heavier than any voice. I brewed coffee, stared at the mountains, knew it was time. At the bank, I closed my account and removed all authorized users. An authorized activity, the teller asked gently. You could say that, I replied, thinking of Caleb's laugh and that party I wasn't invited to. Lena Morales, the gallery director, approached me there. My paintings, she said, were selling through collectors I didn't even know existed, some for 6 figures. My life's work, hidden in plain sight, suddenly mattered. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed relentlessly. Caleb demanded money, his voice sharpened with entitlement. I listened as he sneered. You're just a wallet with feelings. Don't be dramatic. Then he respect. The thing no parent forgets. I wish you had died instead of Mom. I hung up. Silence filled the studio, surrounded by paintings that finally seemed alive. I realized then that saying no was no longer about money. It was about respect. 3 days later, Vanessa, Caleb's fiancée, appeared at my door. She sat in Margaret's chair and told me everything. The lies, the laughter at my expense, the cruel words. I couldn't marry him after that, she said softly. Weeks later, Caleb and Maya came together. Desperate, disheveled, looking to me for the solution to problems they'd caused. I listened, then said the words they had never heard before. I'm sorry you're struggling, but I won't help you. I opened the door, leave. For the first time in decades, the silence afterward felt earned. Their chaos would not define me. I would no longer be a wallet, a resource, or a shadow of their convenience. Time moved quietly. and my life transformed. Lena returned with news. Collectors were clamoring for my work. Paintings I'd considered failures were worth hundreds of thousands. My gallery show opened a year later. 50 pieces, all sold. Recognition arrived quietly but completely. Caleb wrote a long apology, regret stretching across 3 pages. I folded it carefully and placed it in the fire. Some bridges, once burned, should never be rebuilt. I picked up my brush. This painting would be different, not born from grief, but from strength, from knowing my own worth. Love without respect is enablement. Some doors must stay closed, and some fathers finally learn that their value is measured not by what they give, but by who they are. The mountains outside stood eternal. I would endure. I would create. I would no longer be taken for granted.